Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hear that we're running. Everything is moving smoothly up in the booth. We want to thank everyone who's put this together today. Big hand for Kevin and his group for making this, just making it seamless. It really has been wonderful. Nicole already gave you some instructions. If you have questions for us, they're going to ferry them up to me. There are a number of volunteers. Just get your questions to the volunteers. Maybe raise your hand a little bit, pass it to the volunteer, and then maybe 40 minutes in or so after we've been chatting for a while, they'll bring them up to me. I'll ferret through them and we'll get them going. For those of you watching live stream, it's easy. Just type your question into the chat. I believe it's Kara who's going to be fielding all of those questions, and she'll get them to me as well. I'm going to go ahead. Nicole didn't have to give us an official introduction to all of our guests. I'm going to go ahead and do that. There are a lot of reverends and doctors and bishops on the panel, so if I get one wrong, please forgive me. She needs no introduction, but she's going to get one anyway. Dr. Nicole, Reverend Dr. Nicole Charles, is an ordained interfaith minister holding a doctorate in interfaith theology and has concentrated her career in nonprofit executive management and higher education, working with the United Nations, the Rockefeller Center, the National Urban League, Columbia University. I could go on. And of course, she is the current CEO of Edgar Cayce's A.R.E. Seated next to the Reverend Dr. Nicole Charles is Bishop Dr. Jack L. Bomar. He received his Master of Divinity degree from Chicago Theological Seminary, and then he went on to serve in a multitude of New Thought organizations, including Religious Science and Unity, and today is the presiding bishop of Hillside International in Atlanta, as well as the lead pastor at United Church in Beaufort, South Carolina. He's the founder of Blessing Hands USA Incorporated, a nonprofit humanitarian organization established to revive, restructure, and revitalize communities. Seated next to Bishop Bomar is someone that I'm familiar with. We served on a panel about 4 or 5 months ago, is the Reverend Victoria Thomas. She is a certified yoga teacher, a Reiki master, sound healer, inspirational speaker, as you found out earlier this morning, working with the incarcerated in a prior life. She is the spiritual director of Agape International East Spiritual Center, founded by the Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. And Bishop Carlton Pearson is seated next to the Reverend Thomas. His personal mentor, as you found out earlier, was Oral Roberts, who treated him as a son. Bishop Carlton Pearson was a spiritual advisor to President George H.W. Bush, and he spoke alongside Billy Graham at the Oklahoma City bombing memorial in 1996. Millions watched his sermons in person and on television. But once he said there was no hell and believed in universal reconciliation, his relationship with evangelical and Pentecostal America soured. He was labeled a heretic. His life changed dramatically, as outlined in the very well-received 2018 film, Come Sunday. Today, his life is much different. He is the founder of the Metacostal network of churches and ministries, and bridging the gap between his Pentecostal roots and a metaphysical approach to ministry and progressive spirituality. And Reverend Jim Blake is the CEO at Unity Worldwide Headquarters at Unity Village in Missouri. Reverend Blake has more than 20 years of executive leadership experience with some of the fastest growing and most innovative companies in North America. He received his Master of Divinity from the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary. Those in Unity are well familiar with Johnny Coleman. He was ordained in 2021. Jim's first book is The Zen Executive, Gems of Wisdom for Enlightened Leadership, which won the 2022 Silver Living Now Award in the category of personal growth. I may direct a question at any of you, but jump in. It's a conversation. Let me go to Bishop Carlton Pearson first. Bishop Pearson, many years ago, I was a student at Pat Robertson's University while studying the Edgar Cayce readings here in Virginia Beach. I know you're looking at me quizzically. I was a schizophrenic at the time. It's true. Licensed. But when I walked into the halls of both CBN and A.R.E., I saw both these organizations going for God, but completely different. And I felt if you could bring the best of those worlds together, what could we create? Are we on the path to doing that? I look at what you're doing in your ministry. I think we may be halfway there.
Well, we're headed there pretty fast because it's taken decades for us to get this far. But now it's taken a new momentum, even for you to say what you just said, as your background at Liberty.
CBN, but Liberty's close by as well.
I don't mean Lord.
It's Regent now. It's Regent now. It was CBN
Regent
University back
yeah.
then. Yes.
Well, I was on the board at A.R.E for 16 years, so we knew Pat Robertson a lot, and I hosted the show from time to time. But to hear you say you went there while studying here says, first of all, you're courageous. And there's got to be more of you out there that are curious and courageous enough to follow your own, to walk in sync with your own soul. It's very, I'm going to tell everybody. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'm going to brag.
No, that's all right. But the thing is, both organizations had something to offer this world. I know it's
That's
easy
powerful.
to pillory Pat Robertson. I've done it myself. And some of the spiritual myopia that came out of CBN. But there was an excellence there as well. Here at A.R.E, I always felt like there was spiritual ecumenism. But getting the word out to the world was always a little bit slow. So to hear you say, we need to broadcast some of this.
Not narrow. Excuse me for asking
Yeah.
you, what drew you here while you're studying? What brought this to your attention?
What happened was I was drawn to Cayce first, and then drawn to Robertson. And I thought, well, they're both in Virginia Beach. They must have some sort of connection. Yeah, I learned pretty soon. I gave a talk on it here once.
Interesting.
But really, both organizations were going for it, if you will. But the interesting thing was, back in those days, I could tell my friends at A.R.E that I was going to the Christian Broadcasting Network University. But it was hard for me to tell my CBN friends that I was visiting the spook house on the hill. Because but some of those tendencies were already starting to develop at that time. And some of you must have, in your course of your experiences, you must see some of those worlds colliding and converging, hopefully, because sometimes we look at the world and we see, wow, evangelical Christians are in one lane politically and religiously. New Thought is in one lane politically and religiously. And yet at the same time, we're seeing some crossover. You all must be seeing some crossover in the work you're doing.
Sure.
Jack, you.
Well, you know, a lot of the teachings that we espouse through New Thought, you can hear it in mainstream, more fundamentalist Christian settings. Some of our televangelists today. Some
You're
of
not
the
being
We can't hear back here.
I thought this mic was on.
I think a lot of the tenets that we uphold in New Thought, you can hear it in mainstream now. A lot of the televangelists, some of the ministers that we look to, ministries that we look to on TV, they are now teaching and sharing these same messages. I recently heard, and I was quite pleasantly surprised, yet surprised, one pretty conservative fundamentalist minister talking about the power of your mind and being mindful of your thoughts and how you are a spiritual being having a spiritual experience in a spiritual universe governed by it. I was shocked. But we hear this. This is not a new phenomenon now, you know, and especially in this generation that are rising up with this sense of awareness. And so what used to be, I guess, the hidden secret for a select few, it's quite known. And you can hear it, a lot of the entertainers. Oprah has been a wonderful catalyst, utilizing her platform to share this information.
She's been in your church, by the way.
She has. She's been at Hillside several times. And so I to your question, that there is this kind of a colliding or collision of faiths, and we're expanding.
I always found it interesting that an organization that believed in speaking in tongues, laying on of hands, interpretation of dreams, words of knowledge, were really afraid of psychic phenomenon.
Good argument.
What gives there? Pat would do his words of knowledge, and the whole thing is like, wait, that sounds like channeling to me. But you're right that we're starting to hear some of these things. And again, I still think that there's somewhat of a bridge. If you were to go to CBN, if you go to some of the more conservative, white conservative churches, maybe not, it's maybe different in some of the black churches or the interracial churches, but you'd still see some of that divide. But are we starting to see some of that erode? Nicole.
I think one of the biggest things that what I feel is happening, and 2020 brought it in with the shift, is that there were too many people dying, or there were too many people isolating themselves, and it's now a time of give me hope, don't damn me. Mm-hmm. And it's the damning that has dammed up people's thoughts or their guilt, and they're tired.
Yeah.
And they're tired of living in fear that, Bishop talked about. The religiosity, even though, tell me if I'm correct, Bishop, since you're a historian, we know that the word religion, Ray, is Greek to go back. Legion, the legare, is Latin, and that is the source. But religion has not always fed us to go back to that which we came from. It has fed the rules and the dogma and the creeds and the you can't and the bondage. And I think people are seeking peace. And you can't have peace in bondage. And so it's this awakening of the self to say, why should I hate me? And I think some, not all, but if a religion that constantly condemns is kind of creating hatred of the self, and people just want to like who they are.
Reverend Jim Blake, America is losing their religion. Is that a bad thing?
I think in some circles you could say yes, and in others you could say no. Let me come back to that, and I wanted to speak into the previous question and say, I do think there is a, albeit very slow, but a cooperation starting to happen that is happening maybe not necessarily out in the wide open. And what I mean is, Bishop Carlton and I have encountered one another at several different meetings where at first new thought organizations were beginning to come together at certain conferences and meetings. Yeah. So that was the first step in really collaborating together. And then there is Bishop Yvette Flunder in Oakland, California, has a national organization. And she comes from a similar tradition as Bishop Carlton. And she's a black woman, so she had much the same experience of being in a church and then being sort of exiled from that tradition to start this new organization. And we have been to her annual meetings as a New Thought collective. And so you're starting to see some of that. They had one of their annual meetings at Unity Village, in fact, 300 leaders from all across the country. Mm-hmm. So it's happening in small circles. Mm-hmm. It's just not out there front and center yet. And it's really powerful cooperation. They coined a term in her organization. They call it Methabapticostal. Because it brings some of the beauty and sacredness of each of the traditions and puts it all together into this unique formation of what I would, if you want to call it religion. And so I think, I don't know that I think it would be bad if it went away, but I think it's time for an evolution. Yeah, that's what I would say. I don't know that it can stay around in its current form based on some of the things that Dr. Nicole said. The future generations are not. That's not for them, and I don't know that it'll stay that way long. But I think
last night we were talking about the fastest growing religious group in the nation now are the nuns, not N-U-N-S, of course, N-O-N-E-S. But as we talked about, the largest portion of the nuns are not atheists and agnostics. Mm-hmm. They're the spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
And this is what you talk about the youth and where youth is coming from.
They are.
They don't want to go to church necessarily. They don't want to go to the church that their mom and dad and their grandparents went to. But they don't want to lose the sacred, do they, Nicole?
No, not at all.
We're spiritual by nature. It is the divine inclination of the soul and the psyche from throughout history. Trying to manage that became institutional or organized religion, which basically, the word from its Latin origin means to be bound together or to be bound or controlled. The youth of today are growing up like all the young people who were born while the Obamas were in the White House. Across the board, the first president of the United States they would have ever known was a black man and his wife and their daughters and the mother-in-law. The next president was so different from Obama, so they were jarred. And of course, they all want Obama back. But that's beside the point. There was this crazy awakening. It's like the diversity of how races can be. But that generation is saying, tell me more about how we got to where we are. I don't want you to take critical race theory. I want to know what my parents and their parents and their parents believed. And then they're saying, did we really do that, Daddy? What do you mean? My best friend's an atheist. My best friend is gay. My best friend is Hindu. My girlfriend goes with a guy that, my girlfriend goes with a girl. They're saying, I don't get it. And then the parents don't know what to say. That group are going to create their own movement.
They are.
And they're going to teach us. Now, most of us adults at that age, I'm a baby boomer, so I remember the regimentations. And there's a group of our age, like you, I know you're not as old as I am, but you're our age category. We're saying, you know what? I think I'm really ready to try something else. I've been going to the same restaurant, sitting in that same table, ordering that same same meal. It doesn't taste the same. The price has gone up a little, but it doesn't taste the same. Many people are saying, I go to church. I sit there. I know the songs. I know the liturgy. I know the sermon. I know the scriptures, but it's not doing anything for me. So I love that spirit. The universe is correcting, cleansing, and clarifying itself without our permission.
Dr. Nicole, and then Reverend Jim.
I think that last piece is cleansing itself. Whether and it's not asking our permission any longer. It cannot, because it is being divinely guided. When we cannot stop things from happening, and in our own confusion, in our own limitedness, and in our own humanness, we never can rise. We are arguing about influencing or stating our emotions and trying to drive it into science. The young people don't care about any of that. They don't care about the evidence base. They don't care about your white paper. They don't care. This is my friend. And they are showing the biggest acts of Jesus has ever done. And we can learn instead of fighting them, instead of questioning them. We get so upset when someone is different. Haven't we had enough? We're almost at war with each other in our society, and we cannot stop. And young people are like, kill yourselves if you want to. I'm not. I think it's...
Yeah, I wanted to speak into the cleansing part as well. I think in 2023, people and access to information and knowledge and information has brought forth things that historians and educators and academics have known. Someone touched on it in one of their talks this morning about the origination of the Bible. It was you, actually, who spoke to that. And some of us have histories. So just like when I talked about self-awareness, we have to be willing to tell ourselves the truth about ourselves and what we're bringing to the table, our biases, our history, or whatever, so that we can heal that. I think it's true within religions, within organizations, within traditions. If you're not willing to own your stuff and heal it, or at least take steps to heal it. Look, Johnny Coleman, for all the things she accomplished, was not treated well at Unity Village. That's not a history we are proud of. But it's also not one you can shove aside and say, we don't talk about that. That's not healing. That's not addressing what's happening. And so I think there's a call for everyone and organizations alike to step, and religions to step into their truth, own what has happened, and then talk about what you're going to do to go forward to evolve, like I mentioned earlier. I think
Reverend Victoria, I know that you've worked with youth. I know that when in a prior life in California, you worked with people who had drug problems and were going through drug rehab. Do you find that New Thought today is addressing some of those issues, the anxiety and the depression we see all the statistics? Do you think that New Thought is addressing some of those things? It's not particular to New Thought, but do you think that it's addressing it better than perhaps standard or mainstream religion has been dealing with it for so many decades?
Yes, I do. I think that New Thought offers an authentic explanation of what is obvious to young people today. They aren't at all interested in dogma, creed, or hierarchy.
Right.
They're a different soul group. They come in to their bodies at a different frequency, and they demand the truth and authenticity. And I do think New Thought offers that truth. I think that in spite of that,
That was God speaking.
Wow.
That's an amen.
Y'all acting like Pentecostals and quick.
Yeah.
I know that it was in you somewhere.
I was going to say, am I still mic'd? Am I still mic'd?
We're not mic'd.
You are.
I am.
I think that was my mic. Just blew out.
Check. 1, 2.
Well, I was going to say, my son's 23, and I raised him in New Thought. And even though he never once was offered an anthropomorphic man in the sky with an anger management problem where Jesus was the mediator, he still caught this collective belief system that he was. And that, there was something, weird about that. And we talked about that. And one time, I'll tell this story because this is how smart kids are. He went to a Sunday school worship service with one of his friends, and it was Lutheran. And so during the Sunday school teachings, he raised his hand. They were talking about Satan. And he raised his hand and he said, "Isn't God all there is?" And the teacher said, "Yes." And he said, "So doesn't that include Satan?" And the teacher had to go get the other teacher. And he came, he told me the story. They waved him off. They basically waved him off. They did not answer his soul.
You could tell.
And that's what people want, and that's what they're getting. They're not getting that in an organized religion with a hierarchy. They want drum circles and out-of-body experiences and direct contact. And they're not going to take anything less. And if we don't evolve, if church doesn't evolve, then yeah, it'll morph into that.
And there's no evolution without dissolution. We have to be willing, even if you're not eager, to allow certain things to dissolve that don't fit. When I say that I don't believe the Bible any longer is only the inspired word of God, but the inspired word of men about God, and that's hampered because God is really not definable, cannot be defined by or confined to any doctrine. But that which now is not inspired, a lot of that has expired. A lot of the stuff we've used, that doesn't mean it's bad, it just doesn't work anymore. We don't even need it anymore. That's the part, and there's a mourning, M-O-R.
Yeah, there's a U in there.
Yeah, M-O-R-U, and a mourning, M-O-R-N. There's two mournings. One is the end, the other is the beginning. And both sometimes bring tears.
Speaking of beginnings, two of the greatest Americans, Thomas Jefferson and William James, said that a new thought type religion would become the predominant religious experience in America. Not the predominant religion, make the distinction. The predominant religious experience in America.
Good.
I don't know about y'all, I'm still waiting. So I'm wondering, do you see New Thought assuming more territory in our country where people are being drawn to the kinds of ministries that you're all involved in? You may never be as big as a Pentecostal church, but do you see this kind of shift? I mean, did James and Jefferson maybe get it right? That someday the tenets or the principles of what we find to be New Thought would become the predominant spiritual expression. Jack?
I think, yes, but it's not titled New Thought. You hear it in the language, the law of attraction. You hear it, as I said, in a lot of the entertainers, a lot of the individuals, especially that the younger generation looks to as role models. You hear it in the athletes. The universe responds to your demands. The universe responds to your desires. Hold it in mind and you can produce it in your experience. But it's not titled New Thought. I think that it's this higher consciousness language is being shared and permeating our society in this time. And whether you call it New Thought or not, it's happening.
How many of you have an Apple phone? Anybody have an Apple phone? Does your Apple have a bite out of it? You're full of the devil. That's why you're not kidding. This is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What's the man's name? Who invented
Stephen Jobs.
Stephen Jobs. Do you know what the last two statements he made before he died was?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God, oh my God. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my, now he was into Zen Buddhism, and as free as I am, I don't think he was saying the devil or hell. I thought of Buddhist, Zen Buddhist, I was thinking sin Buddhist, because it's not Christianity. But that man came to this earth, committed what he was sent here to do. We used to sing, he's got the whole world in his hand, he got the whole wide world in his hand. But if you got a cell phone, you got the whole world in your hand. And if you lose it, it's like losing your soul. But you lose yourself. But there's something in this knowledge. Knowledge transcends faith. We're moving out of a faith mentality into science, technology, mystery or missed stories. We're mysterious people. We all have a story that we haven't been told and that we have forgotten. We come here, watch this, we come here, this is my observation, experience. We come here knowing from our mother's womb. But between the womb and the tomb, we forget what we know and start believing what we're told. And that's where we get messed up. If you pause, your soul will remind you of what we call ourselves teachers, but we don't just teach, we remind you of what you already know and forgot.
Absolutely.
And you go, oh my God, I've always known that. I think that's the new religion, how our will manifest.
Reverend Jim, and then we'll come down to this end of the panel. Go ahead.
Sure, I would agree with Bishop Jack. I think it's already happening. I think there are aspects of New Thought infiltrating mainstream everywhere between the Oprah crowd that we talked about. Our friend down in Houston who has one of the more larger conservative church movements, his message is New Thought, by and large.
Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
He's really good people. He's a beautiful soul.
Right.
He really is.
And so I think it's already happened. There's a saying we have at the Village when we're trying to meet and attract new audiences, and it's, those are people, they just don't know there are people. Meaning
Yeah.
they're believing in some of the same things that we teach, they just don't know that we're here teaching them.
Before
And
we
so-
move down to this end of
Yeah.
the panel, I want to ask you a question. You might know the answer to this. I've never gotten a definitive answer. But the story goes that Jack Osteen, Joel's dad...
John
Osteen, thank you. Okay, well, that can work either way. But anyway, John Osteen, whatever he went by, apparently he certainly had been introduced to New Thought because his language was mimicking Quimby and the Fillmores and Peale and many others. Was Osteen ever introduced to have a relationship with and I see Carlton shaking his head, yes, with a Unity Church, whether it was in Houston or somewhere else?
A Unity minister. Reverend Howard Caesar, longtime minister at Unity of Houston, ran in many circles with both older and younger Osteen. And so there were lots of connections there. And
Yeah.
Reverend Howard, I believe, has mentioned, being in their offices and seeing books from some of the early New Thought leaders. And so
Yeah.
there is an influence there for
Well,
sure.
they played golf. They hung out together. But Caesar told me himself.
Howard Caesar did?
Howard with the old
John,
man. I've been to that church many times. Osteen was Southern Baptist, then he went into Pentecost, so that's radical already. He was a charismatic, one of the first Southern Baptist preachers to accept the Pentecostal experience. But he was very curious about New Thought. Kenneth Hagin, those guys have studied E.W. Kenyon. They've read Charles Fillmore. They've read Ernest Holmes.
Yeah.
They don't say it,
No.
and they don't dare use the term metaphysical, which is what Jesus was, a metaphysician, because it sounds too new agey.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that in some ways the magic of Peale and Osteen, that they JC'd up New Thought in some ways, right?
You're absolutely
And they brought
right.
them together. I mean, sometimes you'll hear Joel, and he'll give you 60 minutes of New Thought, and at the end it's like, go to a good Bible-believing church. At the end of his soliloquy. But in some ways, what they have done is they've taken New Thought, co-opted it, and sold it to Peale, how many books did he sell with the power of positive thinking? 5, 6, 8 million, or what have you?
Christopher, the thing is, this is the second time around. I don't think people realize that. New Thought exploded in the late 1800s and early 1900s. I mean, there were larger churches and centers studying New Thought than there were the more conservative churches, and they were purposely suppressed. There's a reason many New Thought organizations have a label of cult.
Yes.
That was not because they were cults. That was a response to the rapid growth that was occurring.
Yeah.
There were 4 million daily word subscribers back in the day. I mean, that's the daily devotional published by Unity. So this is sort of the second time around. It exploded, it was suppressed, and now I think it's making its way back into the mainstream. And look at the organizations. Look at the age of the organizations. Look at the age of CSL, the age of the Unity philosophy, the age of... So there's some staying power. I'm not so sure that it's going away anytime soon, quite
But
frankly.
in some ways, you'd like to see, not the devil, but you'd like to see the word get its due, in the sense that Norman Vincent Peale, he lauded the works of Ernest Holmes and religious science. They were actually good friends. But I remember my days at CBN. The first day I was there, going to school, the president of the organization stood up there and he said, "The reason we are here in Virginia Beach is to counterbalance the darkness on the other end of town." Yes, sir.
There you go.
And so there was this kind of push and pull. So in some ways, it's that rejected part of American theology that fundamentalism has, suppressed, if you will. But you can't keep a beach ball under the surface of the ocean forever, can you, Dr. Charles?
And when it comes up, it flies high.
Right. I interrupted you all because we were doing other things, but we were going to come down to this end of the
Trying to
panel.
remember that thought. But it's not, we call it New Thought. It's not new.
Ancient wisdom.
Yeah, it's ancient wisdom. I was in Australia working with the First Nations community there, Aboriginals, and sharing the tenets of New Thought. And they looked at me and said, "That's not new. We've been teaching and believing this for, their civilization goes back
Millennia,
50, 60,
centuries.
70, 100,000 years. They said, we've been teaching this all for centuries.
Yeah.
It's not new. We call it new on how it's interesting. And we're returning back to this ancient wisdom, the original wisdom that's embedded and encoded in our DNA and our soul structure. It's new to us because of how we've been socialized and conditioned through our religious institutions. But it's original language. It's the universal language. It's the language of the cosmos, the language of the divine that we're waking up to. It's not new.
And that's happening, I think you would say, in all churches, in all spiritual centers. So some of this new thought is bubbling up even in black churches, which historically have been fundamental and evangelical.
Right.
That's making shifts and changes. You folks, Carlton, you had a major interracial congregation when you were back in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
You had 6,000 fannies in the seats every Sunday, of all stripes, of all colors, etc. But black churches were slow to come to new thought. I mean, African Americans have been slow to come to Edgar Cayce in some ways, or Edgar Cayce and A.R.E. has been slow to come to African Americans. It works both ways. That's changing. Just look at the panel. Jack.
The black church, probably in this particular society, but black people have not been so, because this has been part of that African heritage and spirituality.
Ancient to us. as
Ancient,
well.
yes.
Yeah.
But it's not the black church, yes, but black folks not necessarily.
When King James, by the way, his first book was on necromancy, 1895. He was into witchcraft and occult and believed in it and hated witches. But 1611, King James English, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. In the English language, creature rarely means human. It means critter or animal, sometimes monster. 1611, 1618, the first slaves arrived here. That scripture, which is a form of evangelism, brought 30 million slaves off of Africa and then later Asia and other parts of the world. Anybody that was not white or Anglo was considered a critter. Now, I have some of my dearest, closest friends are quote-unquote Holy Ghost-filled white people who don't have that attitude. But it's ingrained in the psyche that they are superior, as it was ingrained in my psyche that I am superior because I'm an American Christian, tax and tithe paying Christian.
Male.
And male.
Yes.
And male. There's an
Yeah.
arrogance there. It's a confidence, but it's also an arrogance. And I only realized it after I came out as an inclusionist and I was confronted with my stuff. So I don't have the same attitude about, I have no tolerance of white supremacy, but the idea of white privilege and white superiority, I have it too. Not as white, even though my great grandfather was white. His name is Evans. He came from Ireland and didn't leave us nothing. But but a name, not on my mom's side. But I understand that all of us here, you live better. I don't know where you live, but I can tell you now, you live better than the richest kings of the ancient world, who did not have running water and a shower and electricity and gas and television and
Thai food.
Thai food. They had no colored greens in it. But we don't realize how wealthy we are in comparison to kings with big, airy, rat-filled castles. You live wonderfully. Some of you remember outhouses. I certainly do. We never had one, but we owned some property that had them. 100 years ago, most of the people in there that I grew up had snaggle teeth and dentures and stuff because dental hygiene did not exist 100 years ago. Doesn't matter about the race or the money. Dental hygiene did not exist the way it does today. Just 100 years ago, most people the people I grew up with were very proud to have a pair of dentures. All my Sunday school teachers, everybody had dentures with a little golden. We black folks use more golden than white folks. I don't know what it is. But we were proud because if you could afford dentures, that meant you was like driving a Cadillac. That was big time. Now it's changed so much just 100 years since. But we need to think about that as we evaluate and reevaluate. Even church, we're really, really blessed. Really, really to have this place. I'm so turned on by this property, by the energy. He was a Sunday school teacher. He was a Presbyterian.
Yes,
This
he
man was
was.
a Christian revolutionist, but he transcended some of the dogma and doctrine and started becoming the seer willingly. He didn't ask to be a seer. He just saw. You didn't ask for eyes. You just came here with them and ears. His functioned more accurately than ours. But if you hang around him long enough, the one thing you don't want to miss is have all these people following Edgar Cayce and never gain his spirit. We need more seers, more prophets, more. I didn't get to talk about dreams, which is one of my favorite things that he was interested in. We got to create it, and that the young generation who want that out-of-body experience. They don't want religion. They want relationship with their soul and their psyche and their spirit. And so they'll take a joint rather than come and listen to us.
I was the Uber driver that drove me here.
You're
this
one of the
morning.
rare ones, brother. I'm glad you're here.
He's 32. He's been here in Virginia Beach for 30. He moved here at the age of 2. And he says, "Oh, you're going to that place?" I'm like, "Yeah, the Edgar Cayce Center." He says, "I've only heard about it. I've never been. I've always thought that maybe I should visit." And I'm like, "I think you should really come by and visit. There's some good stuff here." And so he's setting it as his intention to come to explore, see what's happening. So
Thank you.
something wonderful is
We have a
happening.
youth conference here next.
I wanted to answer that question if you wouldn't mind. I think one of the things, people are always asking me, or sometimes my staff, as being a new CEO, where are you driving the organization to? And I used to always say to the staff, and they couldn't hear it, I'm driving it where you're willing to go. It is in our relation where our consciousness is, we can move things. But if you're holding on to movement, if you're holding on to the fear of what, in your mind, what it's going to look like, not the reality of what it is, you can't move. And a lot of times in our own lives, we just don't move because we're so scared of a possibility that's really not our reality.
Wow.
You can't live in fear. The A.R.E., like you said, African Americans, but there is a huge influx of not just African Americans. I'm not just looking for African Americans, I'm looking for people.
Yeah.
I want people in wherever you are. I want races, I want the masses here. The individuals first started with Cayce. It's the individuals and the classes. The classes were what I've came into. The classes was this world that kind of separated itself. I'm now looking at the masses. This is my generation, this is my time. So I'm looking at bringing in that with this team, with forums like this, just to kind of step out, to be like, everybody should have a place at this table. It doesn't matter if I like what you think, but I'm gonna listen to you because I need to step out of myself. And having space for that, I think allows others to come. Because what I've heard people say, I was scared to come here. It wasn't for me. I didn't know black folks were here. I said, everybody's here. And working even with human resources and having those challenges come in to say, if our percentage of diversity is not here, that is outside, what are we doing in here? It has to reflect the world. And that is the problem with the churches. They're not not all of them, but if they don't reflect the world. And you have to be honest, if everybody is at a certain age, there's a problem. There's a problem because it's gonna just stay in that vein. If everyone is of one color, there's a problem. This is not the world.
Good.
You don't mind going outside seeing different trees and flowers, but yet you want your world to look the same with who you interact with, the hypocrisy. That has to stop. That's why we're not growing as a society.
And I think if Edgar Cayce was here today, and who knows, maybe he is.
Yes.
He would be pleased, as I talked about this morning, the evolution growing up in a racist society 12 years after the Civil War. His grandparents owned slaves. And here we sit today, the multicultural, multi-religious, multicolored panel. I think Edgar would be weeping tears of joy. That's just my idea.
Beautiful.
But
I agree, sir.
I think he would be really, really happy.
I agree.
Aren't you, Edgar? Yes.
Yeah.
So, other things, talking about other types of integration and where New Thought is today, I would have to also think that New Thought's openness to gender, sexual orientation, has also opened up pathways, so that I know in our own Unity Church that, as opposed to the Catholicism that I was raised in, people came to our Unity Church because they weren't going to be judged based on their sexual orientation. And I have to be honest with you, my impression, and it might have been wrong, of many of the black churches, not black people, but black churches, was that, you know, even though they were being kicked to the curb by white supremacy, when it came to issues, LGBTQ issues, they didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
And Carlton, I know you must have experienced that up close and personal, how you dealt with that years ago when you were at the enclaves of CBN, whether it was white nationalism, whether it was anti-LGBTQ, was there kind of a thunk within your body that said something ain't right here?
Well, in the African American religious experience, culturally, and you don't read this in history. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
But my grandfather and great grandfather, I knew them all. They told us stories of men, African slave men, being raped. Now, that's not unusual in other cultures, because when you took captivity captive, then they raped the women, but they also raped the men to humiliate them. And our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers would say, "Leave it alone, son. Hush. You don't know what you're talking about. Your daddy's your daddy. Your mama went through something." They wouldn't speak of it. I lived in Tulsa 53 years and didn't know about the race massacre, because our own parents and grandparents were so pained. We're all suffering from PTSD. But in the black church in particular, even though some part of Africa, there was same-sex relationships or eroticism, usually it was the shaman or the spiritual, the medicine man that could have, and they were considered special because they could go either direction. But because of the way we were brutalized, our men were humiliated in front of their wives. They looked at our genitalia and looked at our physicality and our muscularity, and they stood us up naked in front of the world. Now, many of us were naked in Africa or dressed less. But to be exposed like that and then abused, psychologically, it messed up our mind. I think that's one of the main reasons the black church is the last to accept, because our churches are full of same gender loving people, from the pulpits to the back. Whether you're gay, straight, bi, or trying to have sex and can't. You already
It's called buck breaking. Buck breaking.
buck breaking.
The buck break.
That's what
The
like breaking the
strongest
horse.
men to
Yes.
humiliate in the
Yes.
presence of their family, their mother, their parents, their children, so that it was a way of not only dehumanizing, but bringing them under submission.
Breaking their
And so
spirit.
that's why in places like Jamaica and certain other islands, there's
Where
this
slaves
kind
were.
of resistance to same-gender loving relationships because of what happened for so many years to especially the men of the culture.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that perspective.
I wanted to let the men speak first on it because it's an issue that we do know, but we also know that in the 1960s, 1970s, black men were online saying, I am a man. Let's make no difference. Civil rights just came a year after my birth. I'm 50. Some of you are older than that. So when someone has to say to you, our Constitution has not changed, I am still less than on paper, and we forget this. We say, no, it's not, because there's people like us in positions, and yes, we're in positions, but sometimes behind those positions, there's a whole lot of stuff you don't see that we're still fighting. And so it is understanding that we're always saying, ain't I this? Ain't I human? So when a man is trying to say, I am a man, he will hide, because if he loves the same, then you're going to say he's not that. Yeah. Look at our society saying he's not a man if he is gay, if he is this. So you have this whole thing. So it's a society and it's a cult community that is still trying to claim almost their humanity. And they can only do that through the lens of, ain't I a man? And you have to respect that first before he can say, I want to love this person.
That's why, when you hear the term reparation, it's not so much of repairing the economic structure or restoring of finances. It's repairing the soul and the mind of
The
those
dignity.
who've been stripped of that dignity for hundreds of years. And there must be a kind of repairing of the soul, especially in this society, in this country.
Yeah.
When Queen Elizabeth died, I had a premonition that she would make her transition last year. I wanted her to get to 100 too, like her mother. I've been fascinated with the monarchy and made many trips to England since the 70s. But when she died, that marked in my consciousness the end of colonialism as we had known it, and imperialism. The crown jewels, and I've been to visit them, came out of Africa. Africans owned them technically, or originally. This whole idea, we have to decolonize scripture because it has put people in great straits. Now, mind you, I understand if I had been taught all of my life that as a man of color, that I am above white people. Now, according to science and history, all of us came from Africa. The oldest human remains is known as the skeletal remains of a female. They call her Eve, born in Africa. So we were all black at one time, until Cain sinned and they turned some of them white. But up until then, where'd that come from? I mean, the early Jews didn't look like European Jews. Abraham was a man of color. The Turks, people like that. Because that part of the world, the sun shone and people were darker, their hair was a little kinkier to protect them, their scalps. So that's not a racist statement, but there has been an energy or a cabal mentality to suppress the people of color. What's happening now, 50 years ago, white women more than blacks who come out of 80% of our country's population was rural 100 years ago, and 20% urban. It's the exact opposite today, maybe a little more. And when Roe versus Wade passed, white women more than blacks or Hispanics said, we are going to stop having all these kids. We don't need farm hands. We don't live on the farm anymore. We live in the city. We're going to have one and at the most two. 50 years hence, the white race is shrinking, and the races of color are getting larger. And there's a panic out there. I don't have a problem being a minority. I've been one all my life. But minority, low income, you hear all these titles all your life, it shrinks you. So now you got our borders. Where are these people coming from? All of a sudden, tens of thousands a day coming from the South. We can't stop that, but we should go to where those countries are and find out the corrupt leadership there and address it so they're not running up here because they're mistreated elsewhere. So this whole idea of shrinking of one race to another race or races becoming larger in number, larger in voting. Thank God the Supreme Court held up the situation in Alabama.
Yesterday, yeah.
Southern Baptists exist because they were anti-abolitionist. That's the same group that's anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-choice. It's a religious thing, and it's made Christianity. It's given. I have more calls, emails, and texts from my third world country friends that are saying, you guys built clinics and dug wells. How are you all of a sudden calling us, excuse the term, asshole countries? We thought you loved us. Why are Christians following an energy that denounces ethnicity? And call yourselves followers of the Prince of Peace and the compassion. Love is a little bit of a sloppy word because nobody can hurt you or hate you like somebody you love or who loves you. Go to divorce court. Compassion is the more powerful term. Co-passion. You feel my pain. The young, the Black Lives Matter movement would have failed if it wasn't for young white kids. They're the largest group. They're saying, wait, talk to me. I didn't know who's the situation in Minneapolis.
George Floyd.
George Floyd, it awoke young people up in a way we're used to that. We've had that treatment for 400 years. But these young people are saying, wait, whoa, who did that? Where did that come from? Talk to me. I was in Beverly Hills in 2020, driving through, and I saw these Black Lives Movement things. And by the way, all the houses on any block count. All houses count. But if one's on fire, or burglarized, or vandalized, we give it more attention. Of course, all lives are important, and all lives matter. But if one life is being crippled, we give that life a little bit extra attention. But I would stop my car and I'd say to some of these young white kids, I didn't ask the blacks said, my daddy did this, I ain't marching no more. I ain't worried about, I don't even hear the song, We Shall Overcome. It depresses me. It's always been a sad song, it always makes me cry. But these young kids said, you know why we're here? I said, did your mom know you're here? Your dad know? Sometimes they said yes, sometimes they said no, we came out of college. We're feeling you, brother. I said, how old are you, man? I'm 18 years old. I'm 21. You feel me? Yes, I feel you. That's why I'm here. There weren't that many black people involved in the Black Lives Matter movement as far as demonstration. We're always outnumbered by white people. And the nation is listening because their own children are saying, Mama, Daddy, I want to know the truth. This ain't gonna work anymore. I love people of color. I love atheists. I'm in love with another man, a young boy may say, or I'm young with another girl, or my best friend lives with his friend, or something like that. And the parents are saying, son, be careful, watch out. But we're not going to church because you guys are too mean. Now this organization has a mandate, I think, supernaturally, to bring in this kind of beautiful integration of the cultures and the consciousness, and to make atonement, make us the At-ONEment, the radical inclusiveness. We've got to do something with young people. I love all you old folks. I'm a bona fide senior citizen. So I used to make fun of y'all. Now my back is aching, and it takes me longer to pee than it used to. So that's beside the point. But, we've got to. That was really out there. We got to clarify this, and I think one of your leading mandates. And I've said this to New Thought many times, you're in a powerful position. This place will be crawling with new life, new thought, young people doing things. How old are you, son?
23.
Stand up. 23 years old.
Look
Go to
at
the head of
this.
the class.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
What are you here for? Why'd you come?
Just to learn and
Your
listen.
mama didn't make you come?
No.
Wow.
Well, Gen Z, something I talked about today, how America is in a cycle that rhymes with other parts in history, and we depend upon certain generations to really step forward, and the silent generation stepped forward at the time of the Second World War. 80-year cycles, we talk about The Fourth Turning, which is a book that's coming out again very soon, talks about how America goes through these cycles every 80 years. And in that last 20 years, there's an existential crisis where a generation must come forward. Gen Z is where that generation that's going to come forward with the kind of consciousness that we're all talking about here. We need to have that younger generation also demonstrated. And we're all called upon to do it.
Yes, sir.
But Gen Z may hold
Beautiful.
the message here that we need. Are you guys enjoying yourselves?
Beautiful.
Do you want to hear some more? We'll stay as long as you'd like. We've got some questions. Really here till 8. No, till Dr. Nicole says we got to leave. So we're going to take some of your questions that you've handed to us. She'd like to make a comment. The CEO can make a comment. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let everyone know, in case you did not, this event has a dinner. You can still register for the dinner tonight. It's with all of the speakers. Get to know everybody. Some of our members of the board, our chair, his wife is here, our vice chair is here, and some other of the trustees, and all of the speakers. So please, if you would like to do that, please, we would love to have you. There's a lot of food, and
A lot of food.
You know, let's break bread together if you can.
Communion.
Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you. I'm going to direct this first question to the Reverend Victoria. How do we break or at least address the patriarchal leadership in religion today?
How? Well, I don't think it's the job of the woman. I think it is the job and the desire of the sacred masculine to rise up in his true power and honor the feminine. And we talk about reparations. It's not necessary to make reparations. It's just necessary to move forward now, and acknowledging there was quite a lot of burning, and I think that's ingrained in women. They're innately they can be very competitive and against each other, because early in this country that happened with the witch burnings, mothers, neighbors. And so there's a lot to heal, but I think it's going to come from the masculine honoring this natural, which you're not going to find it in any of the Abrahamic religions. So you just need to let that go and move on to truth.
Very good.
Anyone else want to address that question?
Well, let's don't repeat, and in some places, don't even repair. We need to replace a lot of things. The culture behind us is not going to repent, say I'm sorry. But they might rethink, which is one of the other meanings of the word repent. We need our culture. If you walk up and slap me and say I'm sorry, that ain't good enough, because you could slap me again in 2 minutes. You go to the pen to repent. That's where the term comes from. Penitence, brokenness. Black people of my experience, we don't want control. We don't want special treatment. We just want equal treatment. Yes. Y'all ain't ever, when I say y'all, the country's never going to pay us back monetarily. That's not reasonable in today's culture. But give us our place and our space. Make room for us. Give us a space at the table. Let us become bankers. Don't hold all the secrets. Move the gates away. Just include us. We'll make our way. We're a tough group because we've been toughened. Can you imagine coming across the middle passageway? And I've been in those dungeons in West Africa. Designed for 800 people. They were packed 2,000. Some of those Africans had walked 200 miles bare feet. Their feet were raw. Many of them were killed by menacing animals. But it's hot and sweaty, and they're vomiting, and they're defecating, and they're urinating. Women having menstrual cycles on boats, laying naked, chained for 7 days. That's how long it takes. They couldn't take water hoses and clean those wet, unwashed bodies. The stench was horrible. And they would take the dead ones and throw them into the sea. We don't even like to talk about all that. But that happened. Yes, we are scarred and injured and hurting. And we're doing the best we can while still aching. We just want you to say, I'm sorry. You don't heal us, we heal ourselves. But do you know how bad it hurt? That's compassion. When I'm talking with somebody I love, they want to know, my kids even say, Daddy, do you feel me? That's compassion. I love you, son. Do you feel me? Daddy. Do you feel my pain? My daughter will say, describe the pain, baby. Maybe I'm missing something. Doesn't take long. Oh, honey, I get you. I didn't mean that at all. I'm so sorry. Daddy loves you, but Daddy also feels you. When we start doing this in our culture, it's going to heal a lot of us. Don't you think it'll just sweeping across this country? We don't want to put any more crazy people in leadership.
And along those lines, we have a question. I'm going to direct it to Reverend Jim here, because I've heard some of his videos on the Unity Ministries website, World Headquarters website, and he's addressed this. And this is from the audience. How should the church in general atone for their part in racism? And you've done that with Unity. Unity probably has a better record than a lot of mainstream churches, certainly better than the Pentecostal or evangelical churches, but even Unity has a dark past as well.
Indeed.
How does the church in general, you've done it with Unity, how does the church in general atone for that racism?
I don't know that you can ever atone, but you can acknowledge, and you can own it. And then you can step forward and take action to ensure that nothing like that ever occurs again. And we touched on this a bit earlier, and you create new systems and put those in place, and new policies in place. And it's not so much about saying, hey, we're inclusive and we fly the LGBTQ flag. That may have worked a few years ago. In today's world, the black folks, the LGBTQ folks, they want to see themselves in what you're doing. So if you're producing literature, I want to see myself in that. I want to feel safe when I come there. Good. I just don't want to see the flag. Good. I want to see myself in the population of the people that are serving there. I want to see myself in your literature. I want to know that I'm safe. It used to not, in years past, it was just to be seen. Now it's to be seen and be safe. Mm-hmm. And so there's a new term emerging in the DEI work that goes beyond inclusive, and it's called belonging. And it's, I want to feel like I belong now. I want to be, I don't want to just be included. Good. I want to belong. Good. And so it's really about having the courage to, just like we talked about individually, look at our history, look at our embedded beliefs, look at the biases, look at the things that were done wrong, and then own it, step into it. If you can make reparations in any way, do so. But more importantly, put in policies, procedures, and take steps so that it never happens again, and that you create a pathway for people of all the colors and all the traditions and all to be included and belong and have success in whatever your organization is. And
Dr. Charles.
I really appreciate everyone's view on it, and Bishop said it earlier, reparations is the repairing of self. It's really hard to repair or to heal someone else when we're broken. Mm-hmm. I can't see you if I can't feel me, right? And I think that the spiritual journey, the spiritual development towards growth must be that of, I am choosing consciously, intentionally to heal me so that I can truly be able to serve another, because that is our job. We are to be in service. We are to have, as faith leaders, it is thine will. We are here to do the will of God, and we're spiritual people. We are having this experience, but we always forget that. And I'm asking everyone, stop thinking that it's my story alone. I hurt because maybe you're the one hurting me, and when you're hurting someone, when you stop listening. You're hurting someone when you don't see them. We just need to see each other. Yeah. We don't have to write the book. We don't have to rewrite the story. We are our ancestors. Are you not from your mother's 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 mother? That history is still in you. That's the cleansing. That needs to die. That's the reincarnation. That we are yesterday. And we keep thinking, I have nothing to do with nothing. We are yesterday. Did you not do something to someone? We all have hurt someone, and it still hurts them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you don't want to deal with that. It's their story. We all sitting here have hurt someone. So now you're hearing a collective, how do we change? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I don't want people coming up to me, I'm so sorry what you, that's not what I'm saying. It is to begin the process of listening and how I now act to you and how I speak to you. It's not, I want to be conscious, it is just being. Not thinking you have to put on a different behavior in order to come to what you deem as different. Just speak to the damn person.
Hey.
Don't be like, I heard you were, it's none of your business. It has nothing to do with any of us. Just be. And they will accept you for who you are. And we begin the process of just, I might not understand it, but stop looking at the reason and look at the person. And not every person, I don't like every person who might even vibe with. I don't get along with every black person. Get out of here with that nonsense.
Yeah.
Come on, now let's not get silly.
Yeah.
Birds of a feather flock together. This is my flock.
Good.
The work I do is my flock. So look at how you're living. If your world is not showing the world in Walmart, which we all usually go to, or the diversity of Amazon, you're not being that which you're saying. I like everybody. I ain't say you gotta love them, just like them.
This question is from Karen in regards to our youth today and religion, spirituality, or other belief modalities. What do you see as their North Star?
Say that again?
In regards to our youth today, with regard to religion, spirituality, and other belief modalities, what do you see as their North Star? So basically, in regards to youth today, what do you see as their spiritual North Star?
Can I answer? Real quick, it's one of themselves. We need to stop telling them what to do. We forgot what it was to be young. Let them explore, let them fall. We don't let them fall today. Let them fall. They'll figure it out. That's what's called resiliency. You didn't fall and you broke an arm, you healed. Just let them fall. They will find their answer. That's their North Star. Within the third eye, let them connect.
Wonderful, Jack.
Is it what do we think is their North Star?
It's interesting.
I would ask
what
this
do
young
you
man,
see? What do you see? Right.
I would ask this young man right here.
He said, I don't know what the hell it is.
What is your North Star? Should he be mic'd?
Well, yeah, I don't think we have a mic, but we'll
It's
repeat
really
it back
what?
to the audience if he's willing to.
Sure, I mean,
Jump in.
I could, is there a way for me to project?
We
that?
don't have a
We'll
handheld.
repeat with you.
Right.
Is it okay? Come on.
And oftentimes we're making decisions
Well,
and
people.
without inviting the voice of those that we're making decisions for. And rather than, I don't want anyone speaking for me, I want to speak for myself. And so if you want to hear from me, I'll tell you what I believe. But I would like to hear if that question would be more so for.
We're going to get a microphone. What's your name, by the way?
My name is Sean.
Sean. All right, thanks for joining our panel.
Thank you. I didn't expect to be up here, but
I'll repeat the question for you. So Karen asked, in regards to our youth today, what do you see as their spiritual North Star? So what is your spiritual North Star?
for me, I think the core of it is my faith and my family. For me, it's how I have my relationship with God. I've been through a lot in this life, and the fact that I even came and I'm here and I'm a medical student now, to me is just ultimately surprising. I never expected to go into medicine, and I think what's so interesting is just letting life happen. I'll just share a little bit about my story. So my mom is from the Philippines. My dad is American. In the Philippines, my uncle, I've learned, was a manghihilot. And for those not familiar with what that is, that's a person who is basically a faith spiritual healer involved in musculoskeletal rearrangements of people. And I learned that looking back as I'm currently an osteopathic medical student who helps, and I'm learning osteopathic manipulative treatment, which is a hands-on treatment that Edgar Cayce was a big proponent of. It combines both Western and maybe not so mainstream Western practices. But in all the things that I look to what is this loving action that I can do? What can I do to support another person? That's really the core root of everything. And I think the thing that I struggle with so much is looking back from the past of things where I have been the transgressor, is how do I step into the roles that I have to help prevent that again? That's kind of what guides me, is what can I do to not allow another to possibly be their transgressor? What can I do to help heal and just provide that good spiritual fruit for others?
Wow, that is
That's what drives me.
beautiful.
There you go. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
Beautiful, Sean.
That's what I said right there.
That's right. I thought that's what you said, exactly. A couple more questions here from our, and again, for those of you watching online today, if you send a question over in the chat, just put a question in the chat. Carol will do her very best to get that question up to me before we end our session here today. How do you, this is directed to Reverend Jim Blake, how does one prevent burnout, Mr. Executive, if we are showing up at 100% all of the time? How does one prevent burnout if we are showing up at 100% all of the time?
Well, much like what I talked about today, I'm going to go practical. And this is not Jim's prescription. There are data and studies that show this all day. Showing up at 100% all the time is not a problem. It's the length of time that you try to do that. So let me just go to the work week nomenclature. 40 hours a week is max. Anything over that, you're going to start to struggle. And oh, by the way, the science tells us mind fatigue, brain fatigue, body fatigue. So even the people that are wearing this as a badge of courage and saying, I worked 14 hours today, science now says anything past that 8 hour, you're not at 100%. It's like we talked about today. How are you showing up, right? Are you bringing your best self to that last whatever number of hours? And so, first of all, I would consider what that looks like, so the amount of time. And then secondly, and this is the most important thing, and the science supports me here as well, self-care, self-care, self-care. You cannot give from an empty cup. And people will tell you all the time, I don't have time for that. And what I would say is, if you want to make your best decisions, if you want to be at your highest mental and emotional and spiritual capacity, you must take care of yourself. And when you do, you will become more efficient. You will make better decisions. You will have greater inspiration. You will have more creativity. All of these things will take the 80 hours that you were spending and whittle them down to 40 because you are at your mental, physical, and spiritual best. I can't prescribe what the self-care is for folks. It's, if it's walking in the woods for you, for me, I get a massage every other week. I spend some time, I know I shouldn't, but I do a little bit of Netflix and chill and get into, so that feeds me. But I'm very conscious about how much time I'm spending on the work I need to do and how I'm balancing that. Spending time with my family recharges me. And so it really is about the balance. And people are so afraid that if I don't do the work, I'm not going to be as successful. And I'm telling you, the data supports you will be more effective and more successful if you do those things in terms of self-care. I guarantee you. If you do it and you call me and say this is completely failed and everything's a disaster, I'd love for you to make that call because the scientific data shows it. It's been my experience. When I share it with the leaders that I serve with, the performance of the organization, their lives, they leave more fulfilled. They feel supported and cared for. Giving people permission to do that, to have self-care on your teams, makes a huge difference. And so it's really about balance. That's the only way to avoid burnout. And that's what burnout is. What is burnout? Burnout is I have not made time for me or taken care of myself, and now I'm just overcome because all I do and talk and think about is work. And so the opposite of that is to create a fair balance and really take care of yourself. Make yourself a priority. You won't regret it. I promise.
Great. Good
Thank
word.
you, Jim. We have time for about one or two more questions. We'll wrap up by 5:30. Here's an easy one. Was Jesus a shaman?
Yes.
was kidding around when I said it was an easy question. But go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Was Jesus a shaman? Victoria.
That's a term from the tundra, but I guess academically speaking, it's defined as an individual who works with spirits to help bring healing. And I think we have lots of scripture that talks about him talking bad spirits out in a way. And I don't know, how many times does he talk to a spirit?
Well, he was a showman first. What attracted people to him was the show he put on. Miracles, healing, changing water to wine, multiplying bread. He did that twice. If he fed 5,000 men, if you add the women, that could have been 30,000. I've been on the Mount of Beatitudes 12 different times. And I've imagined what he did, but he always put a show on now because Oral Roberts attracted people because of the miracles, whether they got them or not. Edgar Cayce attracted people because he was a seer and a reader and a psychic. It was mystery. He taught, as a Sunday school teacher, he probably taught what all other Sunday school teachers taught. That's not what drew the people to him. What drew the people to him was the signs that made you wonder. The scripture speaks of signs and wonders. Jesus was a showman, which they made him then a shaman. Now we've tried to make him a God. He never claimed to be God, but a son of God. And we don't really need him to protect us from God. But that's what we're taught in Christianity. You got to have Jesus, or God's going to send you to hell. So it's like the devil and God are in cahoots, and Jesus saves us from both of them. But that's another story.
So how do we carry the messages and good inspiring feelings after this gathering? Someone has asked. We feel good and we feel the rush now, but how do we keep it going after all of you are gone and we go back to our everyday life?
Meditate.
Get the videos. Come to A.R.E.
Come to the A.R.E.
Fellowship.
Jim?
So, you got a lot of practical things that you can practice. And that's why it's called a spiritual practice and a yoga practice. Your duty every day, or your job, in addition to your job, is to practice. Pick one thing. Pick two things that you heard today and just practice it. And then as you get more comfortable, add on. If you just go away and do nothing, nothing changes, right? But if you say, okay, I'm going to commit to one thing, or I'm going to commit to two things, and just do it, I guarantee the reward you will get will motivate you to do more and to continue to add on and to continue to learn. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. You come, you hear these powerful speakers speak, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then tomorrow you get up and you get a flat tire, or something bad happens at the house, and now you're right back, and you're like, it's all gone. And so can you just take one thing and try to incorporate that and then add on to it? And it's not, none of us are perfect. None of you will ever be perfect, I don't think. It's a practice. Pick a thing, pick two things, start to incorporate it into your life. The ripple effect will be the reward. The karma, if you will be the reward. You're planting seeds that will bear fruit for you in the long term, I think.
And there's a natural inclination. Was this over net? Somebody asked this over the net?
Either that or from the room.
There's a natural inclination of your soul and your psyche to self-medicate. Whoever taught an infant, an embryo in utero, to pull a milkless thumb to its mouth and self-medicate? They didn't go to school for that. They don't know anything about a computer. The rumble maybe of their dad's voice saying to the mother, why didn't you use protection? We can't have another baby now. Well, not sure. The vibrations and the energy startle the infant, and it pulls its thumb to its mouth. Who taught the baby how to find the mother's breast? It comes out looking. So the point is that there is something in you innately that will guide you if you learn how to listen to yourself and your soul. To over-medicate it or use something like that's harmful to you physically, as of course you would avoid that. But some people are always looking for some way. Not there's coping mechanisms, there's behavioral modifications, but the point is pain management. How can I because I don't know how to avoid the pain, but how do I manage my pain? We come to events like this. We eat. Some people use alcohol. Some people use drugs. Some people use a big piece of chocolate cake. But it does something. Not all of those are healthy. But if you spend enough time with yourself, your soul will tell you. The mechanisms are there, how to find them and make them work in your life.
Christopher, may I add one thing?
Sure. Well,
I'll add one other thing. Part of self-care is removing yourself from toxic people and toxic situations.
Yes, sir.
And so when I say that, I say not only do that, but then find a circle of people or a handful of people or a person that's like-minded, because that also will keep you going after you leave an event like this, because you're like-minded and you're doing the same things and you're talking about the same things. And if you don't have anyone around, there are plenty. All these folks have lots of videos on the web where you can reconnect with that inspiration. But the key is to stay at the vibrational level you have achieved. So if you find yourself without proper boundaries with people that are just negative or toxic, do your best to remove that and get away from it. I know it can be difficult, but it'll make a big difference. It really will.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I think the question you asked is, how do you keep the momentum? And I think the momentum is being around like-minded people, ending those relationships that are not serving you. But there are places, all of us represent one of these institutions where you can get that dopamine need, that can feed that need for community. But how do you keep it going is really you being a part to create it. You can't just come here one time and then be like, okay, that was good, and then you do your thing. You support the communities that you want this from. You support us. I mean, there's no other way to say it. You go to Missouri, you go to Unity, go to Tidewater, Reverend Ann, go to Chester, like go to Hillside, take a trip. It ain't gotta always be fun in the sun. It could just be my edification of my soul.
Yes.
Needs to be healed.
Absolutely.
It needs to be fed. And stop looking at a trip that you gotta always spend thousands on, though that A.R.E. does wonderful international travel.
Fix that right quick.
They have a lovely spa here as well, just so you know.
Come here in Virginia Beach, we have a piece of it. I am really working on partnerships, not trying to think that we're the only ones who have it. This is a community. And it's about building that community, because we each have our own gemstones to share. So go on a Sunday one day to Chesapeake, go next week to Tidewater, but keep going back. And when we start our Saturday soul sessions, come here on a Saturday, break bread. But you gotta feed the communities. It's always here. It's not like you gotta really find it. You just gotta be willing to say, I'm gonna support it and make the time for it. That's it.
Well, before we break for dinner, I just want to thank the Reverend Dr. Nicole Charles.